Daf Testament base, 16 lines from the top. It's a cross from the Tesis of Shleish Alsar and one line up. We learned in the Mishnah that we're not choshesh that a holder might have dragged chometz from one house to another or from one place to another, because then if we would be choshesh, we'd have to be choshesh me chatzah l'chatzah mi earlier and ein l'davar saif. Do we in fact say that we're not concerned that a weasel may have dragged the chometz into the house after the bedika? We learn in the Sefer of the Mishnah, whatever chometz is left over after the bedika, you should put it in a secure area, in an enclosed area, in order that you should not be required to do another bedika. Which implies that if you left it in an exposed area, we are concerned that a weasel will come and drag it to another place. So therefore, you have to put it in a secure area so to prevent that from happening. So you see, we are concerned that Shema Yava Hulda. So Tesa says, even though you don't see from here that from bias to bias and chatzal chatzal, but at least we seem to be that we are concerned that it will take it from one place to another place in the same house. Amar Abaye answers like kasha, it's not a kasha. There's a chilek when you do the bedika on the 14th or you do it on the 13th. So if you do the bedika on the 13th, if it's on the 13th, now there's bread all over. So therefore, if the weasel does take the chometz, then it will not save and leave over anything over, because there's other chometz available to it. So therefore, even if it does take some of the chometz, therefore we're not concerned anything will be left over, because it will eat it. And therefore, in our Mishnah, when we say that we're not concerned about the chulda, it's because even if the chulda does drag it away, it'll eat it, so there's nothing going to be left over. But on the 14th, but on the 14th, where people are not baking any more bread, and it's not common to have bread in the house, is masna, the chulda might drag the chametz and drag it over to its hold, leave it over, and you'll have chametz in the house. So therefore, when we're talking in our Mishnah, so we're not cheshim, that's on the 13th, but if it's the 14th at night, then you have to leave the chametz in a secure area, because the chulda might take the chametz and might hide it and leave it over. Amar Rava says, is the weasel a neviah? That the Yalda, the Hidna Abesa, that knows that tonight is the 14th, they're not going to break any more bread anymore until the nighttime while they make the chometz, and therefore there's no bread lying around, and it's going to leave it over and hide it for later. The chulda isn't a neviah, so of course this is a play on the words, because there was the famous neviah that was called chulda. But in our context, is the weasel a neviah? So he says that's not the shot. Elama Rava, he says, why does it say for the Mishnah? Why does it say that whatever is left over after the bedika, you have to put it in a secure area? Why is that? We're not concerned in general that a chulda might come and take the chometz and drag it, but perhaps there'll be a chulda that will be in front of us and we'll see it. And then if we know that the chulda took the chometz, it dragged it in front of us, that would require another bedika, and then we'd have to do the bedika all over again. So therefore, it's an eitzah taiva that put it in a secure area so that a chulda does not come in front of us and take the chometz, and that would require a whole new bedika. Tani Kavasi the Rava, the Brisa supports this, because we learn in the Brisa, if a person wants to eat chometz after the bedika's chometz, so he's leaving over, he still eat chometz. The shas is until later the next day. So he did the bedika, but he still wants to leave over the chometz. What should he do? He should put it in a private, secure area. So in order that we don't have the concern that the chulda will come and take it in front of our eyes, and if it did that, and then we would need another bedika. So you see that the concern is that Shem titled chulda bifanenu. Ramari Ramari gives another teretz. He says the way the Ran explains it is that he's not arguing on Rava. He agrees with Rava, but there's also another reason, another eitzah, why we would have to be and put it in a secure area. And the Lamaisa Shulchan Aruch paskins both like Rava and like what we're going to say in the name of Rav Mori. So Rav Mori Hamar there's another reason why you have to put it in a secure area, because maybe you'll leave over 10 pieces, which is the minig, and maybe then you'll only find 9. And then, so maybe minastam you're not concerned about a chulda, but in such a case where you left over 10 pieces and now there's only 9, now you certainly have to be chayshish that a chulda drag it, because you see there's one piece missing. That would require a whole new bedika. So therefore, in order to circumvent that, put it in a secure area. But minastam, we're not concerned that the chulda would have dragged the chametz and take it to somewhere else in the house. If you have 9 piles of matzah and there's 1 pile of chametz, and a mouse came and now took it from one of the piles, and we don't know if he took it from the pile of matzah or from the pile of chametz. So the way Rashi learns the case over here is, and then the mouse took it. He took it from one of the piles, we don't know which one, and he brought it into the house. So the way Rashi learns it is that the shaila over here is, do you have to do another bedika? So see, shortly Tesis argues on that, but Rashi says the shaila here is negea bedikas chametz. There is 9 piles of matzah, 1 of chametz. The mouse came, he took it from one of the piles, we don't know which one, and he brought it into a house. Do you have to do another bedika or not? So Mar says, well, this is the case, it's analogous to the case of Hainu Tesha Chanuyas, of the case of 9 stores, which we'll see in a moment what's that referring to. Pirish, if one of the pieces separates from the piles, but we don't know which one. So now there's a piece here, we don't know if chametz is matzah. Now a mouse comes by, and now he takes the piece and he brings it into the house. So hainu sefer, that we know what the halachi is from the sefer. So what are these cases? The Tanya we learned in a brayso, if you have 9 stores and all the meat is shchut and it's kosher, but there's a 10th store, there's another store that the meat is not kosher, it sells nevel. And a person buys some of the meat and he doesn't know which store he bought it from. He doesn't know which one. It's treated as a safek, which is also. Now, even though you might have said, well, go basar right, we always go basar the majority. Most of the stores sell basar shchut. Only 1 sells basar nevela. 9 sells shchut. Only 1 sells nevela. Now, you might have said, okay, go basar right, follow the majority, it's kosher. No, we don't say that. We say over here, since this safek arose in the place where the item, it's in its normal place, it's in its fixed, regular place, that's called kavua. The safek arose, the person bought the meat from one of the stores. He doesn't know which one. So the safek arose in the store. Which store was it? That's the makam kavua. We have a principle which we say called kavua k'mechsal mechzadami. If the safek arose in the place where the item normally is in its fixed place, we treat it like mechsa, like 50-50. So we don't follow the right. So therefore we treat it as a safek. It's a safek d'oraisa. So you have to therefore treat it as iser. And the basar is also, you're not allowed to eat it. That's if the safek arose, he bought it from the store, he doesn't know which one. But if there's meat lying on the street, so there's 10 stores, 9 of the stores sell shchut, 1 store sells level. Now the meat could have come from any of these stores, the majority of the stores, the roiv, sell basar shchuta. Now here the suffix arose on the street. The suffix arose not in the item's fixed place, not in its regular place. It was pirish. It was out of its regular place. It was removed from its regular place. It was found on the street. Over here, we follow the roiv. Ubenimsa halachachar roiv. Here, we follow the roiv. So, this, where we say that where the Torah we darshan in Masechet Ksuvos, the Torah says follow the roiv, that's called the parish meruba, the parish, but it's called kavua, is machsal machsa. So we should say the same thing over here as well. If the mouse took it from the piles, so the suffix arose when he took it from the piles, then we should treat it as kavua and machsal machsa. If, however, the item, the piece was found was out of the piles, if it was not in its piles, if it was, you had a piece over there and you don't know its status, then the suffix arose when it's not in its fixed place. And therefore, you should say that called a parish, meruba parish, and you can treat it as chometz. So therefore, that we should be able to resolve it from the cases, from the brisa of the chanuyas, of the stores selling the meat. So if you have the 9 piles and of chometz, matzah rather, one of chometz, the mouse comes and takes it from one of the piles and brings it into the house, you should require a new bedika. Then if it's, however, if one of the pieces were separated from the piles, and then the mouse took it and took it in the house, then we'd say called the parish meruba parish, and you don't need a bedika. So this is the way Rashi is learning, and Rashi is learning that the shaila is nageya. Do you have to do another bedikas chometz? Tosfos asks on this. He says, how can you compare the cases? Tosfos asks that Rashi is saying, as far as bedika is concerned, how can you bring a right from the Teish Chanuyas, and that's a case of a suffix deraisa. That's a case of a suffix deraisa. And bedikas chometz is the Rabbana. So by case of a deraisa, you go l'chumra. But by the Rabbanan, it's you should go be mekel, and you should say you shouldn't require. Like we will see in the Gemara a little later, that we in fact do make this chilik. So which we'll have to come and return to that point. So he says, however, we could be talking about over here that there was no bittul. If the person did not make a bittul, then it is negeya to a deraisa. But Tosfos asks, furthermore, but he asks another kasha, well, how can you compare it? By the cases of the Teish Chanuyas, there's no chazaka. Now here we're talking when the person already checked this house, he did the bedikas chometz. The question, according to Rashi, is, do you have to do another bedika? Well, you have over here a chazaka. He already did a bedika, the house is becheskes bodok. It has a chazaka that it was already checked for chometz. Now you have a shaila, did the mouse bring in chometz to the house? Well, shtel on a chazaka, leave it on a chazaka and say it was already bodok. So you shouldn't need another bedika. So therefore, Tosfos, the Ri says he does not agree with Rashi's pshat, and we're not talking about whether the requirement is to do another bedika. That's not the issue over here. You don't have to do another bedika. The issue over here is the mouse brought this item, this piece into the house, and it dropped it. Is it muter ba'achila or is it not muter ba'achila? That's the issue over here. And this is a comparison to the case of the basar shchuta, with the basar, whether the basar is kosher or not. Can you eat it or not? And here, so that's the issue, and it's mamish like the same case. Do we say, so if it brought it from the cases over there, if it brought it from the piles, we don't know which pile, that's analogous to the person buying the meat from one of the stores and we don't know which store. And we say, kol kavu k'mechsal mechsa. If the piece was lying on the ground and the mouse brought it into the house, well then it's already pirish from its piles, and we'd say that since roiv, the 9 piles are matzah, we'd say called a parish meruva parish, and it's mutter. So that's the way Tosfos learns it differently than Rashi, but we'll return to this shortly when we do the next piece of the Gemara coming right up. Shnei tziburim, now a variation of this case. Shnei tziburim, if you have two piles. Echad shel matzah ve'echad shel chametz. There's two piles. There are only two. One was matzah and one was chametz. V'lifneim shnei batim, and there are two houses in front of them. Echad boduk ve'echad she'eino boduk. One of the houses you did a bedika. The other house you didn't do a bedika. V'asu shnei achborim. And two mice came. Echad shakal matzah ve'echad shakal chametz. One took a piece of the matzah, and one took the chametz. So they took, we know which pile. One took from this pile, one took from the other pile. But then they went into the houses. But we don't know which mouse went into which house. So one of the houses was checked already for chametz, the other wasn't. Now, a mouse came into each house. We don't know which mouse came into which house. We don't know if the mouse that had chametz came into the house, which already had a bedika, and then you need another bedika, or whether the mouse that had the matzah came into the house, which is baldik, and you don't need another bedika. So the Gemara says, "Hainu shtei kupas." That's analogous to the case of the other case of a brayso of shtei kupas if you have two boxes. The Sanya we learned in the brayso, shtei kupas if you have two boxes. Achal shel chulin v'achal shel truma. One box contained chulin, and one contained truma. Well, if name shnei soim, in front of them there are two soims, there are two soim filled with peres. Achal shel chulin v'achal shel truma. One had chulin, one shel truma. And then the contents of the saw fell into the boxes. Now, if the truma fell into the truma and the chulin fell into the chulin, so then the chulin remains chulin. The chulin can be eaten by even non-kohanim, and the truma is truma, it can be eaten by kohanim. But if it didn't work out that way, if the truma fell into the chulin, now this chulin can no longer be eaten by Yisrael. It has to be eaten by a kohen b'tara. So we say mutarin. We say the box that was chulin remains mutar, and we assume that the chulin fell into the chulin and the truma into truma. Shani yomer chulin say chulin naflu, truma say truma naflu. We say shani yomer. We say that the truma fell into the truma, the chulin into the chulin, and therefore we don't answer it. So even though it's a safek, but we say that it's mutar, and we again rely that the chulin fell into the chulin and the truma into the truma. So here also we should say the mouse that had the chametz went into the house that wasn't checked for chametz, and the mouse that had the matzah went into the house that was checked for chametz, and therefore that house does not need another bedikas chametz. When it says no, yes, we say it in this case. We say a shani yomer, but that's bitruma d'Rabbanan. We're talking bitruma b'zman hazeh, which is truma d'Rabbanan. Therefore, we can be soimech and rely on this and say shani yomer. But chametz araisa mi'amrinan. Would we say by chametz araisa? Would we say that was a draisa de gedin? Would we say shani yomer? Our answers are to bedikas chametz araisa. We're not talking about a chiv deraisa by bedikas chametz. Is that a deraisa d'Rabbanan? It's only a chiv d'Rabbanan. The mideraisa of a bittul b'almasagile, because minatayra it's sufficient to do a bittul. This is an added requirement. This is an added requirement that the Rabbanan said you have to do bedika. So therefore, this is also a din d'Rabbanan, chiv d'Rabbanan, and therefore, just like in the case of the kupas and the soin, I say shani omer. Here also, I can rely on shani omer, and therefore, you do not need another bedika. Now, the question arises, as we saw before, we saw in Taisus. Well, in the case where we wanted to bring the analogy and compare the cases of when we had the 9 piles of matzah and one of chometz, and we wanted to compare it to tesha chanuyos, and we wanted to say if the mouse took it from the piles, it's also because kol kavu kamechsal matzah dami. Well, Taisus, we saw that Taisus asked on Rashi, if you're telling me it's linyan b'digas chometz, how do you compare it to chanuyos? That's a dinner deraisa by basar nevela, and over here it's a chiv d'Rabbanan. So Taisus said that perhaps Rashi will learn that there's talking where there was no bittul. But now in the Maisa, in the Maskon of the Gemara, we're saying that we're talking in a case over here where there where we're talking where there was bittul chometz and it's only a chiyuv d'Rabbanan, and we're saying therefore by a chiyuv d'Rabbanan you can be mekel. So why should we be machmir in the case where the mouse took it from the piles, from one of the 10 piles? Why should we be machmir? We see that in an Isser D'Rabbanan we can be mekel and we say shani yomer. Similarly, over there it's a suffix. We should also be mekel and say that the mouse took it from the pile that was matzah. The Ran explains Rashi, and he says, the way the Ran explains it is, says it's really totally when the suffix arose, the shaila arose, and if it's negay at that time for Nisr Deraisa. Now he says, when the mouse took the chametz from a pile, at that point, before it went into the house, there was already a shaila on that piece. What is that piece? And it's negay deraisa. Because if someone were to take that piece, can he eat it on Pesach? Well, it's negei d'oraisa d'gedin. So we have to paskin on the status of that piece. Well, when he took it, even before coming to the house, we have to paskin, is this chometz, is it matzah? Is this mutter on Pesach or not? Now, on that basis, we would say, kol kavu k'mechsal mechsadami, we would have to treat it as chometz, because it's negea the isser whether can eat it or not. So therefore, in that case, we've already paskined on it that it's already considered to be chometz. Now, when it brings it into the house, we can't say anymore, even though now the b'dikas chometz is negea and in the Rabbanan, we can't anymore say, well, we'll now treat it as being matzah because it's only in Isser Rabbanan. We originally had to resolve the status, to determine the status of this piece, and it was negei and Isser Deraisa at that point. We had to be machmir. We treated it as chometz. We can no longer treat it as matzah. But over here in our case, with the mouse entering the house, the shaila, when the shaila first arises, it's only negei d'Rabbanan, not a deraisa, because the mouse took it from one pile and the other one from the other one. Now, we know when the mouse took it, which was chometz and which was matzah. So there was no shaila over there, which is matzah and which is chometz. So therefore, we didn't paskin on the piece. It's only when the mouse took it into the house and we don't know which house it took it into, now we have a shaila on it. And now we have a shaila on it. The shaila is, negea, do you have to do b'dikas chometz? Now the shaila is, do you have to do b'dika again, or do you not have to do b'dika again? Now, we're talking where it's clear that we're talking where the mouse took it into the house. We don't know which mouse went into which house, and the piece is no longer here. So what is it negea? The piece is not here. Before it entered the house, we knew which was matzah and which was chometz. It's not negea to eating it. We know which is which. It brought it into the house, and we don't have any shaila on the piece. The piece is not here. The only question is, does the house need another bedika? That's a d'Rabbanan. And for that, I can say, shani yomer.